we are going to tell you the story of the wisdom councils in Vorarlberg, in and around Vorarlberg. And the story begins, maybe a good beginning is the year 2004, where we were asked by the governor of Vorarlberg to do a participatory. No, actually, he wanted us to work out a strategy to make Vorarlberg more child-friendly because of demographic change, and because of our experiences we already had since many years with participatory processes. We suggested to not ask experts what is usually done, but to make it a participatory process. And the funny thing was that I was at a conference in Berlin. I came across citizens' juries, and I told the mayor, the governor, we could try that, and I didn't really expect it, but he said, okay, let's do it. And the process of citizens' juries is that they work with a random selection of people. Usually several hundred people are invited, and they work for 4 days voluntarily without payment, work out a proposal for the government. So we invited 2,000 people, randomly selected people, and out of those 2,075 adults came and worked out that strategy paper. And we were a little bit scared, because when you're working for a governor, you cannot fail, it must succeed. So we did an alternative process in parallel. We invited 65 experts. Last minute we organized the open space conference with experts, and afterwards we could compare the results. This was not intended. Only after the process we realized now we can compare the quality, and we realized that what the citizens worked out was at least as good as what came from the experts, and with the huge advantage that it was much more easier for the politicians to put this into action, because it was written in a language that was easy, understandable, and also made common sense to the people. And the government agreed that they took that proposal from the citizens, and they agreed that each year they give evaluation what they put into practice. And if they didn't put something into practice, they had to explain why. So this was quite a success. This program is still running. It was 2004. And the only thing that was not working well is that it was far too expensive. So I guess we spent 200,000 euros for that. And it's obvious that you cannot do that in small municipalities, for example, or in poor rural areas. So we were looking for an alternative. And the same year, or 1 year later, I was at the DF seminar. I accidentally wrote I got a newsletter from Matthias Zurbansen, an email, in which he explained there is a new non-linear facilitation approach, and this I was totally alert, non-linear, and so I thought I must look at that, and I just read the email, and I was so fascinated. It was so simple. It was explained how it worked. You just at that time I read a little bit about nonviolent communication, so I was somehow it was familiar to me to separate all the statements into 4 heaps: challenges, solutions, concerns, data, and I immediately this morning gave it a try. I had a meeting and I worked with DF, and it was fantastic. So I worked for a whole year with DF, even in big group settings. I didn't know that you cannot apply in big groups, so I did it anyway. And only a year later, I went to the first DF seminar. This was in 2005, I guess. And I met Jim, and only then I realized there is something beyond DF that's called Wisdom Council. And I was totally fascinated, and I got Jim to take one day of the 4-day training where he only talked about the Wisdom Councils. And the other participants, most of them were self-employed consultants, and they were very angry at Jim because they were not interested in wisdom councils at all. But Jim, I pressed his button, so he didn't stop anymore. I was excited. Jim was excited. I went home. It was a Friday evening. And on Sunday noon, I was sitting at the table with my family. The phone rang, and it was Jim, and he said, "Well, I'm close to you, and by accident I'm in your area." So we met. I invited him to have a pizza with my family, and actually that was the beginning of our collaboration. And so it took almost more than a year to find the first municipality that was willing to give it a try. I had totally underestimated that it's difficult to find a municipality that's open enough to do a wisdom council. So I have to explain the wisdom council. Very similar to citizens' jury, but you don't work with hundreds of people, but just with 12. A very small selection, 12 to 16 people. In my leisure time, I play music, so this attracted me also. 12, it's a good number. And so you have a small group of people. They don't meet for 4 days, as in the citizens' jury, but only for 1.5. So the whole thing is much cheaper, and it turned out that it is at least as efficient. Very interesting that such a small people can come up with wise, interesting solutions. So in 2006, in the fall of 2006, it was by accident that I was invited by the municipality of Wolfurt to give a presentation about self-organization in a municipality. That's our specialty. We are focused on that since the late 90s. And by that opportunity, the idea came up, and I must confess it wasn't even my idea, but of a guy in that town, that he said, "Can't we do something practical? Because people may not understand it if you just talk about it. Can't we do some practical example?" And I said, we could do a wisdom council. Oh, what's that? And explained it, and interestingly, they agreed. So we did a wisdom council, and it worked out really, really fine. It started terrible, so I tried to limit it to a few minutes. The people started with totally uninteresting personal issues. So they said, "Oh, the neighbor doesn't cut his hedge. We have not enough pedestrian Zebrastreifen." Anyway, so it were minor issues, and they were in a way angry, and they wanted to work out a petition what the municipality should do, and to their own surprise, they found out that actually life is not really bad in that town. And they said, well, actually life quality cannot be improved anymore. That's almost impossible. So they were astonished the second time. And so they said, what can we tell the politicians? And they came up with that they said, we don't want to grow anymore as a municipality. We want to keep this size, and we don't want our city marketing to make big events that have nothing to do with us, that's just for money. We want to encourage our local culture, and actually we should be more frugal, bescheiden. So that was really strange. And they gave a presentation in front of, I was 150, 160 people, and only then I realized they came up with issues no politician could speak out loud. Absolutely impossible. That a politician says, well, be confident with what you have, you're already in a good situation. Impossible. So this was really astonishing, and it took, I guess,
2 years.
2 years after that to get the second municipality that was willing to do a wisdom council. So it was really a tough beginning. What we found out is that it's very difficult to gain trust, the trust of politicians into a process. You have no idea where it will end. And the most surprising thing for us was that it works in a way. Luckily, in the year 2008, Michael came into our office, and Michael took over the responsibility to do wisdom councils. And maybe you take over at this point?
Then I spend all my money and give it to the mayors. No. I started in July 2008 in the office, and then I heard from this wisdom council that took place just weeks before I started in Bregenz, and it was the first of a series of 5 wisdom councils that should take place in Bregenz. They were all part of a vision process, Bregenz 2020, so they wanted to have topics on cultural integration, social area, and so on. And they said, okay, and one on a development project, one city development project. And we said, okay, we do the series of 5 wisdom councils, and it was kind of a breakthrough that other municipalities said, okay, if there are a series of wisdom councils, it couldn't be so worse, so we tried out as well. So, and since 2008, and we jump now into 2013, there have been about 35 wisdom councils here in Vorarlberg on different levels. We experimented a lot on different levels, so on the local level, on the municipalities, on the regional level. Meanwhile, we do wisdom council at the state level, so whole Vorarlberg area. We've done, just 2 weeks ago, we have had the 6th statewide wisdom councils, and we experimented a lot with the process. So is there a topic given, or is it open, and the citizens or the participants decide on what they want to discuss? 1 month ago we did a pilot project where the Wisdom Council had a funding, so they had 3,500 euros to decide on what to spend, on what they like to spend on it. And meanwhile there are special processes just for young people, the youth councils. And actually one milestone is surely the change of the constitution in January last year. So in January 2012, there was this amendment that the state of Vorarlberg commits itself to direct democracy and wants to foster participatory democracy. And we worked on that, and that's a funny story. Maybe you can tell about your dialogue with Matthias Germann concerning this change of the constitution. It wasn't hard to get the participatory democracy into the constitution, because they say when you look at it on the law side, there is no difference between direct and participatory democracy. But we said it's really important that it's, when you refer to the Wisdom Council, that it is participatory democracy. And so it's in the constitution, and we have guidance of the government that commits itself to do 2 wisdom councils a year on the state level, and they have to take the results and talk about it within the government, and then they have to give feedback to the participants and to the public what they are doing with the results. If they can take something out and put it into a political program or whatever. But maybe some words to the process. So Manfred already said the Wisdom Council itself is a very small gathering of 12 to 16 people. They are all randomly selected. So we always say it's like a win in the lottery. If you are chosen for a Wisdom Council, you cannot register for it. That's not possible. And therefore, the quality of it is that you get people who aren't engaged anyway. So we call them in German often Berufsbürger, citizens who are doing a citizen job and going to every open discussion where they can go, and always stand up and speak out loud. And there are often people who they are not so eloquent, or they cannot stand up and say what is important for them. Therefore, the random selection is really important, that you can that you have those people as participants in the wisdom councils. And then the second step is that you have a public presentation of the results. We call it a citizens' cafe. It's a World Cafe format where the results are presented, and then a broader audience, the public and the politicians and people from the public administration can discuss the results and what is relevant for them. And then, in the first place, we ended the process at the second step, but we thought, actually, when it's over at this point, it's not really good, because it's not really clear what should happen with the results, and how can we transfer it to the political system, and how is the feedback going. And therefore we developed a third step. We call it responder group or reflecting group. It's always different. It could be politicians in there, stakeholders, participants of the Wisdom Council, interested people from the public, and they decide, or they consider, what should we do with the results of the first 2 steps. What can we where can we go further? What results should we pick up and work on it for a long time? And this is the base for the feedback again to the participants and to a broader public, what is happening with what they worked out. So these are the 3 steps are the main steps for a Wisdom Council process. And meanwhile, we are quite flexible with it, and we have often before information event about the upcoming Wisdom Council event, or we have ongoing process afterwards where the projects are begleitend, accompanied. Yeah. So that's about the process. maybe to sum it a little bit up, so where we stand now is that we're doing a lot of these processes, and we see that on the level of the wisdom councils and on the work with the citizens, it really works perfectly. So they are really all very engaged, and they would come a second time again, and they often say, the participants, after they finished on the second day, and they spend 1.5 days of their free time, they don't get any money or anything like that. They say, oh, we will run out of time, we could do another weekend discussing all these topics. And but when we do the presentation, and it's like, for me the picture at the moment is that we have two systems that are not comparable to each other. So there are the citizens who are presenting their results, and they're really proud of them and engaged, and they would like to work on it further on. And then there are the politicians on the other side, and they're willing to have citizen participation, and they want to take the results and put it in their programs and so on. But there's some kind of that those systems cannot communicate with each other. So there is a kind of a lack of understanding or a different language within these systems. And we're just considering how can we strengthen the political system or the politicians, that they really get what the citizens are saying, what their message are, and what is behind the surface of the results, what Bedürfnisse, what needs of the citizens are behind the results. And so we have to consider that and think about that within the process. Maybe you want to add anything? I don't know how time.
I guess maybe a little bit.
I'm checking the time.
Yeah.
35 minutes before.
So I think, as Michael said, we think we are at the point where we can truly say that we have a process that works from the citizen side. So it's possible to get the people for a wisdom council. We can provide a space where they can grow into this field and deliver a result. The main benefit, I would say, is that they find an opportunity where they can reconnect with the political system, which is very important. And I think it is really visible how they go beyond their personal opinion, and they grow in hearing somebody like a migrant, or when the young people listen to the old ones, and vice versa. So a real communication takes place. So this is something beautiful and magical, what is happening in these 1.5 days, and it's, for me, still unbelievable when I'm there and listen to the presentation in the end. And I've seen the group in the beginning, and how it is possible that a group of strangers within such a short period of time and not being paid can deal with a tricky issue and come up with a statement they all agree upon. So that's beautiful. And when you see how excited the people are and how fascinated that beyond the political party system they can make a contribution to the common good, this is fascinating. And as Michael said, the difficulty is how can we connect this with this? So this part of the citizen works, but how can we connect it with the political system? And this is much more difficult. In the best case, we have the support of the governor, fortunately, of the old governor and the new governor. And it's interestingly a similar situation on the municipal level. that we relatively often have mayors who really have the strategic wisdom, that they understand intuitively that this is something important they are doing. But on the next level, on the members of parliament, of the local or the regional parliament, it's much more difficult. And they are a bit scared. They are afraid that they may be more legitimate representatives than they are, even though the Wisdom Council is dissolved after the presentation. So this is not a continuous institution just for the presentation. They are scared, and it's difficult for them to appreciate the results and the outcome. Nevertheless, because of the huge gap between the systems, there is a strong interest in wisdom councils internationally, I would say, and we several times considered to found a company to provide the services, but until now we have not decided that. It's not to make money. You can't make money with that. That's not. It will always be depending on public funding, but to be more flexible and work outside of in the neighboring regions. So this is for us an important thing, that we are working on how to implement it really in a system. And what we have come up with is that we realized that we need a step before the Wisdom Council in order to really make the politicians understand what they are doing. So to have a demo, for example, we did that in a couple of days ago in Salzburg. A colleague of mine did a short demo for the politicians, and they were blown away. And so this is something I realized also in this conference, that we cannot afford just to give them the method. They have to experience it themselves, that they really understand what it's about and what the quality is behind it. So I would say that the Wisdom Council is still not finished, the development is still not finished. And therefore it's so important for us to connect with colleagues who work on similar things and to exchange experiences and what we can learn from each other.
What's really interesting for me is that the politicians more and more feel that they have the need for such processes as well. So I had an experience last week. I was invited for a speech about participation in planning processes in a small village, Lech. Maybe you know, it's a touristic place here in Vorarlberg. Skiing, the royals always came into this village. There's a big project going on concerning the development of the center, and there are conflicts on its way, and there was a really interesting evening about participation and the involvement of the citizens, and there were several members of the local government, and then they said, when they heard the angry citizens talking, we had no idea how you are feeling. Why don't you talk to us? And there are those processes as wisdom councils, for example, and that helps the citizens to get to a common statement. And why aren't there such processes for us within the local government? So we are 15 people here elected by you, and we don't have the support of such processes to come to an unanimous statement in this development project. And it was really a great moment that the politicians think, so okay, our lack of communication within the existing working groups is really a problem, and we should consider that participatory processes within the system can solve maybe those problems as well. So maybe there is within the community of the politicians also a changing aspect on its way. So.
Good. Thank you very much. There's now space for questions. Around 5 minutes. So if there are questions about...
You mean the questions on the paper?
No,
or?
not yet.
Okay.
Now we have kind of 5 questions. Erklärungsfragen.
Yeah, I have
Understanding.
one thing that I find curious and I don't understand is how, for example, you have now this possibility to have a petition to actually create wisdom councils, and that's been written into the constitution. Is that correct?
Not directly in the constitution, but in the guidance of the government. So if that happens, the government is, they
forced.
should do it. Yeah, they are forced to have a wisdom council on the state level about the issue of the people.
And
it's not a law; it's a resolution.
Yeah.
Okay. But at the same time, there's still this gap between them actually saying, well, there's no committee. They haven't committed themselves to actually doing something about what happens. Is it curious? Have they committed? I haven't understood that.
Yeah, that's a clarification. So the respondent group, there is a commitment in the law that they will do something with the results of the Wisdom Council. Yes.
They will talk about it.
They will talk about it.
They will give feedback.
They will talk about it.
They will give a feedback.
Yeah. Well, that's a step.
Yeah.
It's not okay. Yeah.
Okay, understand.
Because there is such a wide range of topics and issues, and it's not possible to anticipate what is coming out. So they couldn't clarify what exactly to do the next step. So they just said,
That's a good thing.
we talk about it and we give you a feedback how it's going, or the next steps.
Okay, thanks. It's clearer. Yeah.
And how far are the Wisdom Council? How do you invite people to the Wisdom Council? What criteria are there? How do you pick those people?
They're picked randomly out of the register of inhabitants.
The registry of people who are inhabitants of Vorarlberg.
So, and we have 2 criteria actually. It's the sex and it's the age. So we have 3 categories of the age: 15 to 35, 36 to 55, and 56 to 75. And for example, on the state level, we out of experience, we need to invite 600 people. So as a whole, and so we have 100 per group. And then we invite 600 people, and so we have about 20 that respond.
100 addresses are picked for each criteria. So we have a list of 600. They get an invitation letter, and then they can register for the Wisdom Council. Only these 600 can register. And we see, for example...
And then you choose who you take.
Take them all.
No, you need
Everybody
12 to 16 people.
Yes, but we don't...
Get more response.
Yeah, but for example, the last statewide we had 28 registrations, and we decided to do 2 Wisdom Councils parallel. So maybe the next one
we want to send anyone.
Yes, because they are all volunteers, and we are grateful that they are registered, and so we take them all.
Thank you.
Okay, 2 of my questions were those, but I have a third one. You were talking about a presentation done by the participant, which is in the Citizen Cafe.
Exactly.
So the 12 to 16 people present the result to who? They present to who?
The
The politicians?
Cafe is a public event.
Mm-hmm.
And usually you have the politicians there, people from the administration, and ordinary citizens, maybe other stakeholders also. But it's an open event.
So everybody can come.
Everybody's
And
invited.
approximately 100, 500 people, just to have an idea.
Usually between 60 and 150.
Okay.
The biggest was the enquete with 180.
And do you help the citizen before to prepare the presentation? I mean, it's just, I don't know, how can I picture the situation?
The presentation is completely prepared at the
By
end of the
them?
Wisdom Council by them.
Okay,
And
from the
we support
content
them with the
point-
format, so we often do interviews so that they don't have the stage and they are afraid of presentation for a broad public.
If you would ask them in the beginning of the Wisdom Council who is going to present, nobody would.
I know, that's why I'm
But
asking.
after the Wisdom Council, they usually are so identified with the result that at least 4 or 5 people are willing to do the step. But it is, it takes courage.
Just it's the same question. So they present with a little help as an interview. So you ask and they present. And is the situation set up in such a way that people can even ask a question directly to them? No, just the presentation.
I would say the important, that's our last one, the important point with the setup is that in the beginning when we had the first presentations, we had a cinema style seating. So the Wisdom Council was in front and presented to the audience. And we very quickly realized this is, we fall back into the old patterns. And so what we started to do the presentation in a Word Cafe setting, so the audience is sitting at tables. The Wisdom Council presents here, and then the discussion is on the tables. So this lowers again. The difficulty here is that certain stakeholders can capture the audience, and this cannot happen here. So that's the important thing, and also it's less anxiety here.
Now the last 2 questions, Christoph, no, I'm sorry. Were you before? Because it was Laws.
Then you do, I will
Yes.
ask you to.
Christoph and Laws. I'm sorry.
You said there is a problem with the connection from the Wisdom Council to the politicians. What about the administration? I think it's not only the politicians who have their difficulties. Have you experienced with that? How do they react to?
Actually, that's the crucial point. If the administration people are participation affine or not, if they are committed to this work or not, and if there is resistance, it's very, very difficult to implement any result because, and the politicians said you have to, but they don't really like to. Or,
Actually, there's another layer that
absolutely
needs to be considered.
Yeah, and it's the best way is to have somebody within the public administration that is burning for public participation and is part of the preparation team. So he can support in translating the results of the Wisdom Council to the politicians. So we had this several times. For example, in the region here, Vorarlberg, those communities around this house, we did a process 1 month ago with the money, with the funding, and there's one guy, Christoph Kirngast, who is in charge for the for the regional management, and he's burning for participatory processes, and it was perfect that he was part of the process, and he could translate the results to his mayors, and said that's really what the citizens are talking, and so on. The acceptance of the results were higher.
What we also often have or sometimes have is that the citizens have demands that are already fulfilled. And then there are two different kinds of reactions. That the politicians or the people from administration say, oh, they are so stupid, we already have done that. That's one reaction. And the other is to take this as an opportunity to explain citizens what you are doing. And this is often the case that politicians communicate, but it's not heard. But through the Wisdom Council, you have an open channel to talk about what you're doing, but you have to use that opportunity. You understand? So that's often astonishing that they get angry or disrespectful to the results of the citizen of the Wisdom Council, instead of seeing it as a chance to talk about your own work.
I had a question concerning the responder group. When is it constituted? Is it after the Citizen Cafe? Is it at the beginning of the process?
After the Citizen Cafe. Mostly it's invited open. So after the Citizen Cafe, we meet for the responder group in 2 weeks. So if anybody's here who's interested in it to work on the results further on, you're invited to come. Everyone. Yeah.
Did anybody show up?
Yeah. As for example, this Vorarlberg Bürgerrat we had exactly 2 weeks afterwards, and there were 3 politicians, 2 citizens from the cafe, 3 participants from the Wisdom Council, and 2 stakeholders. So we had about 12 people, I think, and then we split up in 2 working groups on 2 different projects and worked on that, milestones, budget, and so on. Worked very well.